All right, welcome to our next segment. This is going to be our draft for today's episode. And in the spirit of Ferrari's double victory or back-to-back victory with the 499P at Le Mans, we are going to be talking about the best Le Mans winning cars of all time. Now, you're going to have to remind me, am I going first this week or are you, Victor?
I believe this would be your turn.
All right, perfect. Well, then I am going to go for an easy pick. It's going to be the first ever Le Mans winner, the 1923 Canard and Walker 3-liter Sport. Beat out a Bentley in a rain-soaked race, much like last night's rain-soaked race. I'm picking it because it's the first. It deserves all the respect for being the first one to cross the finish line at this legendary race. Not much more else to say. It's a beautiful car. I actually don't know much about Canard and Walker. You may know more than I do, Victor. But it's one of those really early pre-war cars. There were, I think, 20 entries in the top class. Most of them were French manufacturers, except for the Bentley and two Belgian cars. Nevertheless, deserves respect for being the first. What's your first
Yeah.
pick, Victor?
So my first pick, we just talked about it. It's the this year's Ferrari 499P, this year's and last year's. But that's a personal thing because I actually helped on the car. I mapped out where all the sponsors are going to be, and I placed all the sponsor stickers and stuff. So it's just a personal pick for me more so than anything. It won back-to-back races, like we just said, and you know I I have a personal connection to the car, and that's why it's my first pick.
Yeah, that's a great first pick. I totally see it. I thought about putting it on my list as well. And it's funny because I started drafting this list before we watched Le Mans, before the race actually started, and I didn't have the 499P even in my honorable mentions. And now with the back to back, it just becomes so much more impressive. Um,
Yeah.
so my second pick is going to be the Porsche 956, the Group C prototype, one of the most successful Le Mans cars of all time. It took the top three places in Le Mans at its first attempt in 82. In 83, they locked out the top 8 spots in their victory. In 1984, they boycotted the race as the factory team and a privateer won. And then in 85, that same privateer won, and then it was replaced by the 962 in 86. It won every single year it was created, even when the factory team decided to boycott the race. And the cherry on the top for that car is that in 1983, in qualifying for a race at the Nürburgring, it lapped the Nürburgring in 6 minutes, 11.13 seconds, which was the overall Nürburgring lap record until 2018, when it was surpassed by the Porsche 919 Evo, which was a unrestricted, deregulated version of the car that they had used to win in Le Mans in 2018, like 30 something years later. It's undisputed one of the best cars to ever go to Le Mans. So that's why I picked it for my second choice.
Yeah, that Nürburgring lap time, it stood as the time for so long. I always thought, is anyone going to break this thing? And it had to be Porsche on its, again, breaking their own record, and they destroyed it. But that was years and years and years of progress. So that's a good pick. I like that one. So my second choice is probably another obvious one, but it's the GT40, the Ford GT40, specifically from 1966, where they beat Ferrari. It's on my list because of the history of it. It inspired a couple movies. It's one of those tall tales that everyone hears about when they start learning about racing and Le Mans. It was a project that took them a while for them to beat Ferrari, but once they did, they destroyed them, got first, second, and third place, and it was driven actually by Bruce McLaren, which is really cool. So hearing one in person is insane with a 7-liter V8, a 427 in it, and it's crazy. I was lucky that I actually saw Ford bring out all their Le Mans winning GT40s in the 2016 Pebble Beach concourse, and seeing them in person was gave me it gave me spine tingling moments there. It was crazy. So that's definitely why it's up there for me.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to jump then into my third choice, which is going to be in 1991, the Mazda 787B, the first ever Japanese car to win the race overall, and the only car to ever win Le Mans not using a traditional piston engine design. Instead, it was powered by a naturally aspirated four rotor. I mean, the sound that that car makes, if you're not familiar with the sound of a four rotor, it is a deathly sound. If you think it's a normal engine, you'd think it's a broken engine, but they are these crazy cars. It was special as well because it was completely reliable for the whole race. No mechanical issues, no off tracks, no incidents with any drivers, just in and out of the pits every time, consistent fueling, and it took the win in 91 with Bertrand Gachot, Johnny Herbert, and Volker Weidler behind the wheel. So that's going to be my third pick.
That was actually on my list as well, being a rotary enthusiast. It's always been up there as one of my favorite race cars ever. It won because of its reliability, and people think that rotary engines aren't reliable. So that just proved them wrong. It was also special because I believe it was the first Japanese company to win Le Mans as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, yeah, that was up there for me. You took it from me, but I'm glad I have other ones on my list just in case. So my next pick is going to be the 1995 McLaren F1. So that was it's the road car is my favorite road car of all time. Designed and built by Gordon Murray to be the greatest road car, and it wasn't even supposed to go racing. They modified it a little bit, and customers brought it racing. And so in 1995, they took the overall win. And it was driven by Yannick Dalmas, JJ Lehto, and Masanori Sekia. So I think it's one of the last cars that you could drive to the track and then drive it back home after winning Le Mans, which to me is insane. It was such a greatly engineered car that it beat out other cars that were designed and built purposely for Le Mans. It was an underdog, but still one of the greatest cars ever made. And, you see them going for 20, $30 million now. So I'm not the only one who thinks so, but it's, yeah, definitely up there on my list.
Yeah, that was going to be my next pick as well. I mean, the car filled out four of the top five places in the race that year, and like you said, it was in the second class because there was a whole class of prototypes that were faster above it. It was also, as you mentioned, the last road-based supercar to ever win Le Mans. And forgetting about all that, it was also McLaren as a brand's first ever attempt at Le Mans, and it was a first win on a first attempt, which is something that most manufacturers would dream of being able to do.
Yeah.
All right, well, that was a really great pick. So this goes into my last pick, and my last pick is going to be the Audi R8 LMP car. The Audi R8 raced between 2000 and 2005 in the LMP class and won every single year except for 2003 when it was beat by a Bentley Speed 8, which was a car created by VW Group based on the R8 using a modified R8 engine. So if you put that little asterisk in there, it basically won 6 years in a row. It was powered by a 3.6 liter twin turbo V8. It's a really beautiful car. When I was working for Pirelli Motorsports and the Sports Car Vintage Racing Association, there was someone there that owned one of those cars, so I got to see it race probably half a dozen times, and seeing it go around the track, it's beautiful, it is loud, it is fast around the corners, and it unsurprisingly dominated every single race in the Vintage Racing Association that it was up against. So that's why I put that one there.
I'm jealous. I would love to have seen that. That would have been great. So my last pick is a car that you actually really like, and it's the Porsche 911 GT1. And it's because it was, one of the cars that Porsche had to pretty much built for WEC for the GT1 class. and then converted into a road car. So the public got lucky that people can drive these things. They're super rare. I can't remember how many they've made, but they look like a 911 somewhat, but they're not really at all. So it's a great looking car. I think it dominated when it entered, and Mercedes actually had to take the same approach later to build the CLK GTR, and it's one of those cars that will go down in history as one of the greatest homologation cars that you could buy. And seeing them race out with the McLaren F1s, with the all the other GT1 class cars was amazing. I love to see it, so that's why it's on my list.
Yeah, that's a great pick. So that rounds out our top four picks, but there are so many amazing Le Mans winners. I know we're going to have a fat stacked honorable mention section here. So hit me with your honorable mentions to start, Victor.
So the next one on my list for an honorable mention would be the 2018 Toyota TS050. That car was pretty dominant. It was the last car to be in the LMP1 class pretty much before they changed it all to the hypercar class. And Fernando Alonso won with it when he left F1 for a little bit. So it was a great car, pretty dominant in what it did, and it's great to see a legend like Alonso win Le Mans with it. So yeah, that's mine up there.
All right, amazing. Well, I have a couple that I need to throw out here. First one is going to be in 1949, Ferrari 166 Mille Miglia. That's the car that put Ferrari on the map. It won in succession the Mille Miglia, the Le Mans 24, and then the Spa 24 hours. That was the racing pedigree that allowed Ferrari to get the funding to create the Ferrari band further and create the legend. Another shout out is going to be the Porsche 919 Hybrid, the LMP1 car that the aforementioned Toyota just competed against. It was essentially between the Porsche and the Toyota for most of that era of LMP1. And I mentioned that car because it won 3 times in a row from 2015 to 2017. And it was this car that was then turned into the 919 Hybrid Evo, which then set the lap time that finally beat the 956 on the Nürburgring by setting a 5-minute 19.546 second lap on the Nürburgring. Let me tell you, if you're a motorsport enthusiast and you have to watch one lap, one onboard in the history of onboards, please watch the 919 Hybrid Evo onboard around the Nürburgring. I've never seen a video that looked so much like it was in fast forward at normal speed. It's haunting how fast he's moving around that track. So that's going to be my other honorable mention from today's episode.
Yeah, that lap is legendary. I see it, and I can't remember what the driver's name was, but he has balls of steel at that. Like, I don't know how he did it without thinking that he's gonna die. It doesn't
Yeah.
look real, but like you say, he destroyed the previous records by a long shot, and that's no easy feat. Barely anyone could get into like the sixes and the low sixes, and they did into the low fives. So that's
Yeah. Yeah, and
but
I'm not 100% certain, but I'm fairly certain that it's still the only car to break the sub 6 minute mark. I think the
no,
VW IDR did
yeah.
6:05, I'm pretty sure. So I think it's the only one under the 6 minute mark. If it isn't, it's one of 2 or 3 cars
Yeah.
maybe that have gotten under 6.
I believe there's one or two. I can't remember. I would think that the IDR would, but I guess not. But
I thought it
it's
was 6:05 for the IDR, but I'm not sure.
yeah, but it's a ridiculous car.
Yeah. Either way, it blows every other car away by a mile, so that's why it's there.